Pakistan says both Iran and the United States have chosen Islamabad as a mediator and that it will be honored to host talks between the two in the coming days.
We have remained actively involved in all efforts and initiatives aimed at bringing this conflict to an end. Pakistan also has very important relationship with the United States. We have remained actively engaged with the U.S. leadership as well as part of our efforts to de-escalate the situation and finding a peaceful resolution of the conflict. In this context, Pakistan is very happy that both Iran and the U.S. have expressed their confidence in Pakistan to facilitate the talks. Pakistan will be honored to host and facilitate meaningful talks between the two sides in coming days for a comprehensive and lasting settlement of the ongoing conflict.
Well, the announcement came after four-party discussions in the Pakistani capital with officials from Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, and Turkey attending. The countries have slammed the hostilities as being not in favor of anyone and created a special committee to strengthen ties between the four participants. Pakistan sees its mission as facilitating a lasting settlement to the war between the U.S. and Iran that has already lasted for 30 days. Well, let's discuss these recent developments with Jamal Aziz, Executive Director of the Research Society of International Law, who joins us from the Pakistani capital. Jamal, good to have you on the program with us. So Pakistan says both Iran and the U.S. have agreed to Islamabad facilitating the talks, becoming the first open mediator since the start of the war. Why do you think it was Pakistan that managed to bring the warring sides together for talks? Is this a surprise?
Thank you for having me. Pakistan's emergence as a mediator is, I think, not a coincidence. It has certain critical factors, three interrelated factors in my view, which very few, if any, country in the world possesses. Number one, I think that we have dual access to both Tehran and Washington. We share a 900-kilometer land border with Iran. We have deep cultural, historical, and religious ties with Iran. The second largest Shia Muslim population in the world resides in Pakistan. And historically, we've had quite friendly relations with Iran. When it comes to the US, Pakistan has had historical relationships there have been fluctuations in that relationship, but the military and the diplomatic architecture, we both understand each other quite well. And also our Prime Minister and Field Marshal Asim Munir have developed personal rapport with President Donald Trump in the last year or so, and I think that is bearing fruit in this situation. Secondly, Pakistan also has skin in the game. This war, if it drags on, it will economically, strangle us. We are dependent on remittances from the Middle East. Our energy imports, we're one of the most vulnerable countries in the world to the energy shock. So I think in classical mediation theory, whenever a mediator has a skin in the game, that incentivizes the process much more. And finally, there is historical precedent. Pakistan has always played a very strong role, an outsized diplomatic role at the UN Security Council, especially in the early days of the UN when it came to self-determination movements all over the world. We opened the back channel between the US and China in 1971 through President Nixon. And we also were active in the Taliban-US negotiations in the Doha Agreement in 2020. Broadly speaking, I think it's also due to the fact that Pakistan over the past 15 years has invested in has bet itself on being a rational actor, on investing in the rules-based order, which seems to be completely unraveling. But we have tried to be a rational actor, tried to balance relations with all nations, and I think that is playing dividends today.
So this is certainly a positive step, but do you expect anything meaningful to come out of these talks at this current stage of the war?
Well, I think it's important that we should take a realistic perspective. This is not a peace conference. This is basically, this in diplomatic terms is known as pre-negotiation. We are kind of setting the stage for, to release the pressure valves, for there to be for a channel to emerge, so that a potential off-ramp can develop between the countries. Now, obviously, there are too many different factors at play. There is a lot of room for skepticism, but at least in this situation, when the whole world is currently, deadlocked by this crisis, we are seeing at least the possibility possibility of messaging being engaged, and the Iranians are engaging through us, and the Americans are also seem to be quite keen. So I think that generally speaking, there is some possibility. But I think a broader point that I think is interesting is that for me as an international lawyer, it's interesting that back channel mediation and regional, these dialogues are emerging as the primary format for conflict management. And this is because those 1945 architecture that emerged has completely, is paralyzed. The UN Security Council is not playing the role that it should be, because for years, the norms that underpinned that rules-based order, because of its selective application by primarily the Western countries, it led to the downfall of those, in the lack of credibility of those systems. And today, Pakistan, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and Egypt and other countries, we're trying to reinforce the norms, because the norms remain. Just the architecture for enforcing those norms has weakened. So the norms that agreements must be honored, that wars must end through negotiations, that sovereignty must be respected, that territorial integrity must be respected. These are the norms which countries like Pakistan are trying to, emphasize, that we need to revive these norms. And because this traditional architecture of enforcement of those institutions has been away, we are seeing new channels to emerge. So I think in that respect, these kind of, meetings and dialogues and arrangements are quite interesting.
Why would Iran agree to take part in direct talks with the U.S.? Were they given some sort of security guarantees, especially given the fates of its previous delegations and the strike on the Hamas delegation in Qatar in Qatar in September?
This is a very important question, and yes, it is. I think it's a very fair one. I think one of the reasons, a major reason for Iran being comfortable with Pakistan is that Pakistan is not Qatar. We have a significantly recognized military power and nuclear power, and we do not have, the threat or the influence that the Israelis can perhaps operate with impunity in other countries. That is not, the same factors are not in play when it comes to Pakistan. So definitely there's an element of protection. But I think broadly speaking, I think it's also that we are seeing that the Iranians are also engaging. They're taking maximalist positions, but it's not that they are, absolutely cold to the process. They've sent back their, 5 points to Islamabad. And so I think that there is some signaling involved. And because, frankly speaking, the alternative is worse, right? It is also not in anyone's interest, larger term, for this conflict to continue open-ended. And Iran right now has the strategic, some say it has the strategic advantage. Whether that strategic advantage continues when this war drags on into 40, 50, 60 days or maybe longer, whether it will be able to maintain that same strategic advantage as it has today, that remains to be seen. So perhaps an off-ramp through a third party might be in everyone's interest.
Talk to us a little bit more about the makeup of this group. So the nations that gathered for talks in Islamabad include Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Egypt. Why these particular countries?
So all of these countries have, a direct skin in the game, and they are, power-based. Pakistan is obviously the location, is the interlocutor. I already mentioned why Pakistan is playing the role. Saudi Arabia is, one of the most powerful Muslim countries. It is directly affected by this conflict. It is facing attacks. And its energy imports are directly impeded by it, and its influence on how the rest of the Gulf states will respond to any talks is directly relevant. Turkey, is a major NATO ally. It has a strong diplomatic. It's a heavyweight, and it gives this kind of negotiation a broader credibility. And Egypt has obviously for many years played an active role in Arab negotiations in multiple different regions and different situations. So I think all of these countries are cross-aligned. Now, the interesting position is that some of these countries are NATO alliances, some are BRICS members, some are SCO members. And this, I think, is very interesting because it seems that this is a coalition of the cross-aligned. And I think that the traditional binary of Western versus non-Western, camps, that has broken down today. And right now, these kind of what we are seeing is multipolarity in action. And if a solution emerges with these countries involved, I think it will give some, cover to other countries, to Washington and Iran, that it would not be seen as a Western-led argument, or it would not be seen as a Chinese or a Eastern Bloc argument. So I think that these countries being involved, it will give more credibility to the overall process. But it is certainly a very interesting time. We are seeing multipolarity happening, unfold in front of us, and those Western traditional binaries breaking down.
All right, we're going to leave it there. Jamal Aziz, Executive Director of the Research Society of International Law. Thank you.